Right then, welcome to my next guest feature. We have on the line joining me my next illustrious special guest, well-known best-selling international author and writer, Joss Sheldon is on the line with me. Hello, Joss.
Hello, Dan.
Welcome to the show and agreeing to be a special guest. It's a privilege to have you on.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be on. I really appreciate it.
Wonderfully welcome. How long have you been a writer, Joss?
5 years this December, so the anniversary is coming up anytime soon.
And Joss Sheldon, that is your is that your author's name? Is that your proper writing name?
Author's name, personal name. Yeah.
And
I only have one name.
Do you have a pseudonym as well, or do you just like to be known as your real name?
No pseudonym. No. Just one name. Keep it simple.
Because some authors they do like to use an alias, don't they?
For sure, but I think the majority go with their own name, and I'm comfortable with who I am and being called by my normal name.
That's good to hear. You have a new novel out. It's called let's get this pronounced right. Individutopia.
Individutopia.
Yeah. What's your vision of dystopia and utopia?
My vision of dystopia and utopia, well, I'd love to live in a utopia, but I think we're heading towards a dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
That's what.
And what is your book about?
It's a dystopian novel which takes the trends we've seen over the last 35 years of Thatcherism, neoliberalism, to the extreme conclusions. So taking the trends we've seen of privatization, of people becoming more individualistic, of society breaking down, and taking this to its extreme conclusion where everything has been privatized.
Right.
There's a price for everything.
Yeah. And
the whole society is broken down and everyone is only out for themselves, so much so that they don't look at each other, talk to each other. They're in their own bubbles, just trying to be number one.
Kind of seeing that at the moment, to be fair, with everyone engrossed in technology. Everyone, it's like a survival out of the fittest out there, isn't it? Everyone's in the race, isn't there?
The economic situation we have now is built on this bastardization of the survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest was actually meant to be something good. It could mean the survival of the fittest society, the survival of the fittest families, the mothers who care for their children the most, societies who care for the weakest members the most. But within this neoliberal survival of the fittest, it's all about the individual. One individual surviving by being stronger, more brutal, more vicious. And that is what has inspired the individualism of neoliberalism, which says that everyone needs to compete with everyone at the workplace, to be the best employee, to get information. Everyone needs to compete with their neighbours to have the biggest house or the biggest extension. Everyone needs to compete with their schoolmates at school to get the best grades. And through this sort of individualistic competition, you've seen society break down. And this has been the mainstream theme. No one really challenges it anymore. It's just accepted for the way things are.
And where do you see the world in 2060?
Well, hopefully we'd have had a revolution of some sort, a soft revolution, and things will turn around and we'll go back to our natural way, which is a nice combination between individualism and socialism, about looking out for ourselves and looking out for others. But the book Individutopia is based on the fear that we don't have a revolution, we don't challenge the status quo, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And in that situation, you would have a situation whereby everything is privatized, including the air we breathe, and you'd have to pay for that because it is so polluted, including every public street, and you have to pay for every step you take down a path where there's no job security or no trade unions to represent us, and therefore you have to look for a 0-hour job every single day. Wages have fallen so much that you can't earn enough to survive. You have to take on more debt, and your debt is constantly going up even as you work hard.
Quite serious stuff then. On to our next question. Do you think we will be living in a Big Brother society?
No. My work is inspired by George Orwell, and obviously Big Brother is something that George Orwell came up with. And there's definitely been steps in that direction. We see CCTV cameras on almost every street. We have the Snoopers Charter, which allows the government to look into our browsing history and our emails. We're moving towards that to an extent. We still do have that big state. I think more than anything, we've seen in the late 70s a shift away from the big state. Yes, it still exists, but we've sold off businesses which weren't owned by the state to a private sector. And so we're seeing a big private sector where nationalised industries become privatised industries, but big government which used to rule over us. Now we have big business which rule over us, whereas we used to have propaganda to try and brainwash us. We now have advertising to brainwash us, to tell us about things we don't really want with money we don't have to make an impression, which won't last on people we don't even like. But the whole shift has been towards the private sector. So I don't think we'll have the big brother of the state sector, but we have this big private sector which is large, and I think that's a real threat.
I see. And you mentioned George Orwell. Are you inspired by the legendary author himself?
Of course, yeah. I didn't like reading so much when I was a youngster. We had books imposed on us at school. It was only really when I gave up English at 16 and started reading my books, the books I chose to read, that I got into reading. And it was George Orwell, who was one of the first authors I got into, not just 1984 and Brave New World, but Down and Out in Paris and London, Homage to Catalonia, these books which were deeply political. I stumbled across an anarchist bookshop in Whitechapel in East London and tried to get into that sort of libertarian, freedom, anti-capitalist, anti-state information. And I was surprised to see George Orwell, but when I sort of thought about it, I realised that he was in the right place there, and he's one of those authors that comes up. He inspires libertarians, he inspires anti-capitalists, he inspires socialists, he inspires communists and anarchists, people who might not have much in common but are united by Orwell. He's a great author who's inspired me, and he inspires all
of course,
but especially this one, which is clearly inspired by 1984.
Yeah.
And that,
so we're going to go on to that in a bit. Was George Orwell a visionary?
I think he wrote in a new style, which others have tried to copy. He's inspired lots of people, and he saw the future ahead of the time. Things like CCTV cameras, propaganda, perpetual war. This idea of Eurasia always being a war with Africa until we have to wipe the slate clean, and then we're at war with another continent. And we see this. 1 minute we're at war with Iraq, who before were our allies. We were funding the Taliban, and then we're at war with the Taliban. He predicted stuff for sure.
And his book 1984. He died 1 year after that book was released in 1950, didn't he? Not long after that was released. And also Richard Burton, who starred in the same film, died that very year. Do you reckon that's an omen?
If you ask if I'm going to die in the next 2 years, I hope not. What sort of omen do you mean?
Yeah, so in a sense that George Orwell died 1 year after he released 1984 and 1950. Richard Burton starred in the film 1984 and died in that same very year. Could there be a link there between that book and that actor or the author there?
You're suggesting it's cursed. There's a curse of Superman, I think, where people who played Superman died shortly after.
Yeah, interesting.
I hope it's not a curse. I'm not sure it's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's a great book, and it's sad people died. But
yeah, true. And also, are you inspired by the work of H.G. Wells, A Time Machine, and War of the Worlds?
I'm not sure I've read those books, but so I can't say I'm inspired by them.
Yeah, sure.
He's not the only author that inspired me. I'm very much inspired by David Graeber, who's a modern-day academic. He inspired my last book, Money, Power, Love, with his book on debt, and also Individutopia, which features jobs which people do because they have to survive. They need to do them to earn a wage, which don't actually produce anything. And that's sort of Orwellian, dystopian, and David Graeber writes about that in the real world. I'm inspired by by Gabriel Marquez, the South American author, of his magical realism style, as well as Salman Rushdie's magical realism, which features in my other books, and I'm inspired by plenty of authors, not just George Orwell.
I'm just about to wrap up now. Thank you so much. Very insightful, your works. And finally, how would you describe yourself in 5 words?
Ooh, 5 words. Radical, anarchist, cheerful, rational, entertaining.
Yes, I would say you're quite forthright as well. You say it how it is.
I do my best.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Joss Sheldon, for sharing your experiences and good luck with your writing. The very best to you.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with the show.
Yeah, Joss Sheldon. Wow. Thank you very much.